I'm Rick Lewis with Feed on Hoop Report. On today's segment of Coach's Corner, I have Coach Doug Esleeck, the new basketball coach at Forsyth Country Day. Welcome, Coach.
Thank you, Rick. I'm excited to be here, man.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Now, Coach, a lot of people don't know, but you were born and raised in Winston-Salem. You graduated from Westchester in 2001. Your wife is also from the area. She's from Clemens, and you graduated from North Carolina in 2005.
That's right. Yeah, we're both from right close by Forsyth Country Day. It's really kind of coming home for both of us. We have a little girl who's 4, and so the grandparents are pumped beyond belief to be that close to her and us, and be able to be a part of watching her grow up. So it's an awesome opportunity for our family.
Well, Coach, being the new head coach at Forsyth Country Day, you have a pretty impressive resume, and you've gone through the college ranks. Some people say going in reverse, because a lot of times people go through the high school ranks to get to the collegiate level. But when you graduated from UNC in 2005, your immediate job out of college was the director of basketball operations at UNC Greensboro.
Yes, sir, that's right. I never really knew exactly what level that I wanted to coach. I just knew that I wanted to. I got an opportunity when I was in high school to just kind of be involved as a part of summer workouts. And I loved, instructing and teaching, even with, my teammates, even at that young age. And I wasn't very good, Rick. So I knew that my playing career was, had an end date, and it was fast approaching. And so if I wanted to be involved in hoops, I was going to have to find another way. And so I really felt like, man, coaching would just be an awesome a way to impact kids, make a difference, and be able to still be a part of the game. And so when I went to Carolina, I actually double majored in American history and business. And my thought process was, if I decided I wanted to coach at the high school level, then I could go and get certified to teach history. And the business degree was, I had a good enough feel for the industry to know that at some point I was going to get fired. And sometimes it's hard to find a job. And, that business degree would give me a chance to find work if that's what I needed to do to support my family or what have you. And so that was my thought process. Even as an incoming freshman at Carolina, I wanted to set myself up for what I felt like was the career that, the Lord had for me. And I was just trying to cover all the bases, just depending on, what my path ended up being. And I was really fortunate to be able to step right into, the Division I ranks. We're using job in air quotes, since that was a volunteer position. And Coach DeMint was nice enough to pay me like $2,000 to do the summer camps. But, it was a job, I guess, but not in the strict sense of being employed. So.
Now, when you went to UNC Greensboro, you were the director of basketball operations, and a lot of people don't understand it's so tough getting into the collegiate level. But when you're the DOBO, or director of basketball operations, you're doing a little bit of everything except for coaching. Talk about your experience then at Greensboro and what your duties and responsibilities were.
It was a interesting transition for me. I mean, part of it, I was so overwhelmed with just the workload of Division I basketball, and Coach DeMint is an unbelievable coach. His motor never stops. He is always working and thinking about how he can help his guys and help his team, and push everyone a little harder. And so I really learned what a full day looked like as a college basketball coach working for him. I had no idea that, you showed up at 7 and sometimes you didn't go home at all. I slept in the office more times than I can remember. That was before the virtual film exchange. And so I had the stack of, VHS deals. And so I'd put the game tape in there after the game and put 10 blank ones in there and press record on all of them and wait, 2.5 hours later, swap them out and get my film exchange stuff ready. And so sometimes that meant, you were done at 3:30, 4 a.m. And it's like, I got to be back in 3 hours. Like, why drive home? Just
Right.
sleep underneath my desk. And so, you know, those experiences were invaluable for me, but I really got to see what running a Division I program was all about. You know, the ordering gear and the scheduling classes and workout times, communicating with bus companies and hotels, and dealing with ticket requests. You know, you're the kind of the touch point for administrators in your program, and so I was interacting with all of those folks, from, you know, equipment people to athletic director, and everyone in between. You know, game scheduling. You know, we had academic guys that we were in charge of. I mean, it was just, you know, the list of responsibilities was longer than my arm, you know, because, you know, Coach Dement's philosophy was he wants his coaches coaching and recruiting, and he wanted me doing everything else, which was awesome for me. It was just such a tremendous experience. But, you know, while I was in school, I had the really cool opportunity to coach an AAU team, 13, 14, and 15 under. And then I got to coach at a high school a little bit my senior year in college. And so I was used to being on the floor. Like, even my first opportunity of coaching with the JV team at Carolina as an assistant, like, I still got to coach a little bit. You know, it was all of my experience with basketball had all been around playing or actually coaching. And so then to be put in this role where your job is everything except for that was a huge adjustment for me. And it was hard. I can't say I liked it. But, you know, in hindsight, I'm so glad that I had that experience, and I wouldn't trade having gone through that for anything. You know, but if you had asked me at December of that first year, December of 2005, you know, how's it going? I would have been like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. So
I can relate to that, Coach. I have a son named Tyler and also Colby that both of those are, you know, director of basketball operations as well. And, you know, they want to get out on the court, but, you know, they're doing everything but basketball. But I fully understand your pain in that regard. In 2007, you had an opportunity to be an assistant coach at Gardner-Webb. And while you were there, y'all had a tremendous win over Kentucky. What did it mean to you to be an assistant coach at such an early age and also beating a program like Kentucky?
You know, at that time, to be honest with you, I didn't have a real understanding for how big a deal that win was. You know, I mean, I knew, you know, I'd been at UNCG for a year. I'd finished my first year at Gardner-Webb. I was in my second year at Gardner-Webb. And so I knew, you know, that those guarantee games, you know, you're not supposed to win. You're supposed to lose by 40. And I certainly understood that at that point. You know, but that program, you know, Kentucky was, you know, they were really young. Coach Gillespie was just trying to get it going. And so they were a little vulnerable. And we had this amazing group of kids that were just so confident, so skilled. Coach Scruggs did an incredible job of giving those kids a lot of confidence. And so they just played super loose and free. And they were so competitive and tough. Like we'll never forget that we had a kid named Nate Blank from Indiana. Just kind of his face up, really tough, 4-man, skilled, could shoot it. And he got his nose broken during the game. One of the Kentucky kids, like, just, you know, inadvertent, you're trying to get a rebound and elbowed him right in the nose, and it, you know, there's blood everywhere. And Coach Gillespie said after the game, he knew that the Wildcats were in trouble when his kid, after whacking Nate, went to try to help him up. And Nate, like, pops up ready to fight. And he was like, I knew at that point that, you know, they had the tougher team. They were more determined, and we were in serious trouble. But it was an awesome experience to be in Rupp Arena. And I tell you, I've had the opportunity to be in a lot of places, and that is a special, special place. You know, they have these, I don't know if you've ever been to a game there, Rick, but they have all of these men that are like ushers, and they have on these, you know, Kentucky blue coats that, you know, make sure you get to your seat, and they're like security in those back hallways and all that stuff. And those men were so kind and respectful to us before the game. And then after the game, it was the exact same. They were so gracious and congratulatory just the classiest group of men. Like that was the feeling you have as you come in and go out of Rupp. It's like, man, this is just a top-notch, classy place. And even when we won, I still came away with that opinion. It just a really, really cool experience. Being an assistant that young, to be honest with you, I had no idea what I was doing. I wish, I really owe an apology to all of those guys that I coached at Gardner-Webb, because I learned so much from my time there. I got to coach Scruggs, really let me, make mistakes and learn by doing. And that was just such a good experience for me to experiment with some skill development stuff, learn how to do a scout. We didn't have an operations guy at Gardner-Webb, so a lot of the stuff was chopped up. So I ran study hall. I did the laundry. I had equipment. I was in charge of getting coaches tea every day. Anybody that's worked for Coach Scruggs knows he needs a tea every day. So that was my job. But, it was some of the operation stuff and the basketball stuff and administrative stuff all together. But I got to get my feet wet in coaching, and it was humbling, because you start to realize, like, man, there's so much about this game and this business that I just don't know. And it was price. Like, every experience that I've had along the way has just been these great building blocks. You need to go through those things to grow. And that's certainly what every year in my career has been. But at the time I didn't really know that I needed that. I know I need it now, but at the time, when you're young, you think you know everything. And that was going through those first couple of years in the business really showed me how little I know about basketball in particular and in the business in general.
Well, since you graduated from Carolina, and of course, being an assistant coach at Gardner-Webb and then beating Kentucky, so which is a tougher place to play? Is it Smith Center or Rupp Arena?
You're Rick. I'm going to plead the fifth, because no matter what I say, I'm going to have a huge, passionate fan base sending me hate mail. So I'm just going to say that both colors of blue are amazing, and both programs are awesome, and I love both head coaches. And I'm just going to leave that there and not step into that minefield. But
okay.
two awesome places to have a chance to compete. And if you're on the bench, the home bench, it's really fun. If you're on the visiting bench, 9 times out of 10, it's really not an enjoyable experience, for sure.
Now, after Gardner-Webb, you had a chance to go on to Mercer to be an assistant coach under Bob Holtmann. And in 2014, y'all had a tremendous win when y'all went, I think you went 27-6 that year. But the most important win was when y'all beat Duke in the round of 32.
Yeah, that was a special group of young men. The thing that was so cool about that group was, in my first year, there were 8 freshmen. That my very first year, and 7 of those continued on all the way to 2014. And it was just super tight-knit group of kids. We really struggled their freshman year, because those kids were playing a lot of minutes and they were not ready for that. And we were in the league with Belmont and Rick Bird, and Cliff Warren was at Jacksonville. Like, it was just this buzzsaw of a league. Scott Sanderson was at Lipscomb. Like, good luck, and those little freshmen just were not ready. And Coach Holtmann did an unreal job of building with that crew and keeping them encouraged and finding ways to manufacture some wins, and just getting them to their sophomore year, where we actually won the CIT that year, which was an awesome experience. And you asked earlier about Rupp Arena and the Smith Center, and I'll tell you, I don't know the name of the arena at Utah State, but that is the toughest place I've ever been a part of coaching a team in my entire life. That place is absurd. Greatest environment I've ever been in. But anyways, so won a championship there. And so that was like 6 postseason wins that year that those kids went through, and they won a championship together. the next year, we win the regular season, and Florida Gulf Coast was in our league. And that was the year that they did the Dunk City deal and made it to the Sweet 16. And so that group of kids beat us on our home floor at Mercer to go to the NCAA tournament and had a great run. So the next year, Florida Gulf Coast whole team is back. Our whole team is back. USC Upstate had an unbelievable team. Coach Payne had put together a absurd roster. Torrey Craig and bunch of Carlo Glenn, a bunch of tremendous players. Kyle Perry, who's at Limestone now, was instrumental in putting that group together. And but anyways, the league was just jammed with good players and good coaches. And so we ended up tying with Florida Gulf Coast. And so Gulf Coast got to host the championship game.
Right.
And so that group of kids, like, it's their last rodeo, right? And we're in the semifinal game against USC Upstate on our home floor. And these kids have accomplished everything except for going to the dance. And it took us double overtime on our home floor to beat USC Upstate that year. So we squeak by, escape, go down to Florida. You have to, drive how many hours that is down there. We have a day to practice. We beat Florida Gulf Coast on their home floor to go to the NCAA tournament. And then we're all, we do the watch party thing, and they say, hey, it's going to be Duke. And I was sitting next to Coach Holtmann, and we knew we were worried about Iowa State. We thought that could be our matchup. And if our memory serves, Lavelle Moton and North Carolina Central were unlucky enough to draw those guys. I think that was like a 30-point loss for them. But we were worried about that draw. We didn't want any parts of those guys. And the one we kept talking about, hey, if we could get Duke, we got a chance. Because our kids they'd gone through the CIT. We'd been to the NIT the year that Gulf Coast beat us, went to the NIT and beat Tennessee on their home floor in the NIT. Like, those kids had almost a dozen postseason wins between conference tournament, CIT, NIT, conference tournament again their last year. And so we knew, like, 7 seniors, seasoned, tough, together, skilled. Coach Hoff had them right where he wanted them. And Duke was this collection of guys who'd never done it before. It was freshmen. Like, Rodney Hood was a transfer who'd never played in the NCAA tournament. Jabari Parker, freshman, had no idea what was going on. Like, Quinn Cook was their only kid that had some experience in the tournament. And so we were like, that's the matchup that we want, because we got a chance. And of course, the NCAA, of course, they love Coach K so much, they let him play in Raleigh. So it's basically a home game for the Blue Devils. And so we go up there, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. So Coach Hoffman is famous for all of his offensive plays. He's this offensive guru, like playbook thicker than, like an encyclopedia set. And we always started every practice with 5-on-0, going through, all the plays, and he would shout them out, and our kids would echo them, and we would run them over and over and over again. So we have a live practice the day before we play Duke in PNC Arena. And so when you have that live practice, anyone can be there, fans, media, then usually the opposing coaches will come and hang out. So all the Duke assistants are sitting right there at the media table. And I was like, what are we going to do? Like, we always start by running all of our plays 5-on-0. Like, what are we going to do? I was like, no way Coach is going to because he's super secretive. It's like, no way he's going to do all that. And sure enough, Hoff is like shouting out 5-on-0 stuff, and our kids are running through like all these different plays. And you can see the Duke assistants are like, they're scribbling all this stuff down, and our staff is laughing because we're like, yeah, I mean, we probably ran through 25 plays, but like, we have another 300 where those came from, boys. you ain't writing all that stuff down. But that was an amazing experience. Like, as a Carolina grad, to beat Duke in PNC, I had so many friends and family that were there. It was we win the game, and they in the locker room at PNC, the one we were in, it's this fairly small locker room, and so the coaches were dressing in this little shower area. So me and one of our other assistants, Jake Nelp, had our stuff like hung up on the on the same shower head back there where we hung our suits back there, and we're back there afterwards, and we're just so thrilled. And he looks at me, and he's like, "What do we do now?" like all we had thought about for 2 weeks, every second of every day was how do we beat Duke by 1? And we did it. And we were literally, the dog that catches the car. Like, what do you do now? And as bad luck would have it, our matchup is Tennessee, who we had beaten the year before on their home floor to end their season in the NIT. And so, we weren't surprising those boys. Like, they knew that the Duke thing wasn't a fluke, because the last time they saw us, we ended their season. And they were just too big and too good. Coach Martin had those two monsters, and we couldn't handle all of that size and strength and athleticism and talent and good coaching. It just was it was too much. We were we had already called our car. We were good.
Well, too, I'm sure it's very difficult for the players to have that emotional letdown after they have the tremendous win over Duke, and you're so excited, and now, like you said, what's next? And you have Tennessee, and naturally Tennessee doesn't have the reputation as a Duke, so they're not going to get up for a Tennessee game like Duke. So it would be difficult, even if Tennessee wasn't as tough, just to go up the next day because of the emotional letdown.
Yeah, no question about that. And, Coach Hoff, the very next year, one of his big takeaways was, when we're in a tournament setting like that, we need to talk about it being a 2-game tournament. He's like, the next time we get back, we need to talk about, hey, this is a weekend, this is a 2-game tournament. We're not going to win 1 game, we're going to win 2. And that was one of his big takeaways, was that, you need to dream even bigger than, upsetting Duke in Raleigh. Like, that's, seems like Mount Everest, but like, let's dream about going to the moon. Like, let's go to the Sweet 16. Forget that. Let's go to the Final Four. Like, dream big and don't limit yourself, by your dreams. And we certainly fell victim to that. We dreamed about beating Duke, and we accomplished our dream. And then it was just like us, just like Coach Nelp and I said to each other, like, what do we do now? And that was Coach's big takeaway from it. And, he's not wrong about that.
Well, after your job at Mercer, you had the opportunity to join C.B. McGrath, which I'm sure you knew him from your days at UNC, and you got the job as an assistant coach at UNC Wilmington. And of course, that didn't end as quite as well. But the tough thing about college coaching is the fluidity in the business, and it's always so fluid. You're moving around. You're a young coach. You went to UNC Greensboro. You went to Greensboro as a DOBO. Then you went to Gardner-Webb as an assistant coach. After Gardner-Webb, you went to Mercer. Now you're at UNC Wilmington. So you have to have a very supportive wife to say, okay, we're going to move every 3 to 4 years.
That's right. And we were actually, as we're packing now, we're counting it up, and this will be move number 6 since we got engaged. And, to be fair, a couple of those were in town in Macon as we went from a rental to buying a house. And a couple of those were as we were, getting engaged, figuring out our living situation at Gardner-Webb. And then we were only there for, like, we never ended up living together at Gardner-Webb, even though she had moved to where we were going to end up living in Gastonia. I got the job. We went on the honeymoon, came back, and I left the next day. And so I never even moved into our place in Gastonia. So some of it was circumstances, but still 6 moves, in 11 years is a lot.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier that we have a 4-year-old little girl. And so you start thinking about, kindergarten and figuring out what's best for them and what you really want for them and for their life. And that's been huge, as anybody can attest who's becomes a parent. That's a huge life change. You stop thinking about yourself so much and start thinking about others. Even getting married didn't move the needle enough for me. Like, I was still way too selfish. And, but having our little girl has helped me say, hey, what's best for my family
Right.
is doing what we're doing, what we want to see ourselves doing 10 years from now, or do we need to explore some other options? And, when Coach McGrath was let go in January, I knew that, when the season was going to end, there'd be a new coach and, most likely I wouldn't be retained. And so I had this pocket of time from mid-January until mid-March to really explore, what do we really want to do? And I had a lot of conversations with my wife. I had a ton of conversations with people inside and outside of basketball, and really kind of settled in on, what I'd really love to do is have a chance to run my own program at an independent school. I had such an amazing experience at Westchester, and part of that was because of my varsity coach, Pat Connie, reached down while I was in middle school and started to build a relationship with me and showed an interest in me and encouraged me. And I've always thought, like, man, if an independent school could really build a structure where from, middle school or even elementary all the way up through varsity, there's a clear path, there's a runway for kids, there's a structure in place where they can develop, where they can, learn the game and then grow their skills and then expand their skills inside of a coherent system from middle school and up. Like, how valuable that could be for the kids that are in those schools. And I've always wanted to build that. I've always felt like it's something that is missing from, because over in Europe, as you know, Rick, like, they're huge on those national teams. They start kids so early and they have them in the system, and it's like this machine, it's like whatever the Russian guy's name in Rocky, like they've got them so early, and they just mold and mold and mold these kids as they come through a pipeline. And, in American sports just doesn't have anything like that. And it's like, I'm not trying to build, the Russian fighter, but I do think there's a ton of value in a coherence of strategy, program design, skill development from, the earliest ages that you can have a kid in that pipeline all the way up through when they graduate high school. I think there's a ton of value in that, not only from growing as a basketball player, but having a great experience at a school as you transition through, middle school to high school and all those kind of things. And so I kind of settled in on that. And, when this opportunity presented itself, it was really a dream come true. It was the answer to our prayers, to many people's other prayers for our lives. It just was, it's one of those things, Rick, where you can just really feel like, man, the Lord had something going on here. And, we're
Divine
excited.
intervention, coach. Right.
Yeah. When you just get confirmation that, like, man, this is where the Lord wants us, and this is what we need to be doing. And, if we can just hang on to his will for our lives, everything's going to turn out the way that it should. This was certainly one of those instances. It was really neat how it all unfolded.
Well, I remember the conversation after CB was let go, and you had reached out to me and said, "If you ever hear anything," and I remember us having conversations going back and forth, and I remember the opening that was at Charlotte Country Day, and I wasn't aware of Forsyth Country Day, but I know that you were from Winston, so the opportunity to come back home has to be a dream come true, and have the opportunity. If you look at Forsyth Country Day, and of course, it's a special place for us because both my boys, Colby and Tyler, went to school there. And the facilities at Forsyth Country Day is impeccable. It's a beautiful campus. The sports facilities are absolutely gorgeous. So you do have a great opportunity to build a program at Forsyth Country Day.
I really agree, Rick. I was involved in a couple of different opportunities, and, Forsyth, the personal aspect certainly played a role in why that was the right opportunity for us. But, the all the things that you mentioned. Is not only does it have an incredible academic reputation, the education there is second to none, but they also have this tremendous infrastructure for their kids that are pursuing their athletic dreams. I mean, you have like this amazing stadium for soccer and lacrosse and field hockey. You have we're redoing the track. It's going to be a world-class track that'll be done in time for the spring independent school state championships. The tennis facility is tremendous. It just, as you go down the list of, opportunities athletically, it just is, it's really a special place. And it's a little outside of Winston-Salem. You don't just happen across Forsyth. You end up on that campus because you're going there. Right. And so I think that's something that we're going to be really focused on is driving as many people to campus as we can, because like you just mentioned, once you step foot on that campus, you're like, man, wow, look at this place. You're blown away. And the more people that step foot on and can be blown away, the more people talk about our place and get to experience all the awesome people that are working there. I think the more excitement will build for our entire institution from an academic and an athletic standpoint.
Coach, you spent 15 years as a collegiate assistant coach. What lessons will you bring to Forsyth Country Day that you learned as an assistant coach?
The biggest thing for me that I'm really determined to do, and we talked a little bit about kind of integrating the program over the course of middle school and elementary school all the way up through varsity, but being really focused on the skill development of our guys. That was one of the things that Coach Holtmann was really adamant about, that every single day, all year long, every kid in our program was going to get an individual skill workout. And a lot of high schools, you're like, well, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources, we don't have the facility, we don't have the whatever. And, and my response to that is yes, we do. We have that 2-hour block in the afternoon every day, and we have that whole court, and we have however many coaches we have, and we have all these basketballs. Like, we have 2 hours. And so how are we going to prioritize how we spend our time on the floor? Are we going to spend it on only team stuff once we start playing games, or are we going to still press into developing our players as developing their skill over the course of the year? And, and I've told every person I've gotten to talk to in the Forsyth Country Day basketball pipeline that, hey, the day before we're supposed to go play Greensboro Day in January, we're going to do 20 to 30 minutes of skill work with every kid in small groups. And we're going to figure out, hey, we might only get an hour and 15 minutes as a team to prepare to face Freddie and all of his studs. But each kid is also, we're not going to neglect how they can develop as players and growing their game. Because, when we have them at the high school level, at the middle school level, they're just at the beginning of this basketball journey. And if we could impact kids the way we did at Mercer, the way we did at UNC Wilmington with skill development, I know that we can do the same thing, and even to a greater extent with the kids that we have a chance to be around at Forsyth Country Day. And so if we'll be purposeful, if we will have a plan in place for each kid, if we will stay diligent every day about working on each kid's skills, I know that that's going to pay off over the course of a year, over the course of their career with us. And my goal would be is that they go to college into a Division I setting where, the skill development is a normal part of the day, and they're ready for that. This is just a normal day for them. Yeah, I do a skill workout, and then I practice, and then I lift. It's just a normal day. And I really am passionate about that skill development piece. And I really believe that it will serve our guys at Forsyth Country Day well. I told the father of an 8th grader yesterday that I want his son's trajectory at Forsyth to be something that everybody looks at and says, wow, like, what happened to that kid? What happened to those 8th graders, those 7th graders, those 6th graders over the course of the next 4, 5, 6 years like, they have gotten so much better. What are they doing over there at Forsyth? Like, we need to send our kids into that program, because look what's transpired with that kid and that kid and that kid. And that's what I'm passionate about, is developing a reputation within the basketball community for developing players on and off the floor, and giving them the best opportunity to reach all of their goals and dreams with regards to basketball. Because we know at Forsyth, the academic piece is going to take care of itself. Those educators, those teachers, like, they're going to knock that out of the park with every one of those kids. So now what are we doing on the athletic side to make sure that the same can be said about us as kids go through our pipeline and graduate and move on, to the college level, whatever that might look like.
Now, Coach, you've had the opportunity to work under some really good coaches throughout your career. Who's had the biggest impact on you as a person and also as a coach?
That's a really hard question, Rick. My first year at Gardner-Webb, our staff was Tim Kraft, who's the current head coach at Gardner-Webb, Chris Holtmann, who's the head coach at Ohio State, and myself, and obviously Coach Scruggs, our head coach. The next year, it was Chris Holtmann, Andre Gray, who's at UNCG now, and myself. Just like, I was with some amazing mentors during that time. When I was at UNCG, I worked with Rod Jensen, who had been the head coach at Boise State for a ton of years. Unbelievable basketball coach. Brooks Lee, the son of Coach Lee, who's been at Carolina, was at Campbell. Like, Brooks was unbelievably influential in my young coaching career. And then I go to Mercer, and I get to work with some of the greatest assistants that I've ever been around. But the thing, without a doubt, that really sticks out to me in my journey was the environment that I was in at Mercer. Coach Holtmann is a strong Christian man. At the time when I got to Mercer, I was not really a believer. I just was, I'd gone to church as a kid and, whatever. And the environment that I was in, our director of basketball operations is now a minister. Has since left Mercer and gone into the full-time ministry. And he was my roommate on the road for 7 years. Coach Holtmann talks about his faith and uses scripture all the time. I was with an assistant, Jason Aker, there, he was a GA with us when we beat Duke, and there's no doubt in my mind that Coach Aker being there and shooting with our guys, he's had the biggest impact on me from a skill development standpoint, and how he thought about skill work, how he prepared for it, how he worked out guys. He's kind of the model for me about how I think about skill work, today. But those men speaking into my life about Jesus, and I went to church for the first time with our ops guy, Jonathan Howard, and Coach Aker, to their church. And my wife and I were baptized in that church. And that's, all of the coaches I've had a chance to be with, have all shaped me in so many different ways. But there's no question that being in that environment, Mercer, around all those men, all those believers, that it literally saved my soul. And so,
your life.
yeah, it's the biggest inflection point in my life, and it's not even close. And and so I really, I don't know that I could get around that experience, those men, the impact they had on me. That was the biggest thing, in my life for sure. But Coach McGrath, and when I was at UNCW, like, he is one of the greatest men in college basketball. Like,
no
one of the greatest human beings in our game. And he's going to get another job, and someone will be so fortunate to have their son mentored by him. I would, if he ended up coaching women's basketball, like, I would beg Greer to go play for him. Like, just the greatest person. I got to reconnect with Jack Emanuel, who we graduated from Carolina together. That was an awesome experience for me to spend more time with him, get to know him. as a professional and as a coach, not just as an amazing player, which he obviously was. So I've just had this most remarkable basketball journey. And a lot of the names that I've said today, whoever, the 6 people that listen to this, this podcast, Rick, probably aren't gonna know a lot of those names. But that's the crazy thing about, basketball, is that some of the best people to ever do it are people that nobody even knows about. Nobody even knows about. And obviously everybody knows Chris Holtmann now, but so many turns of fate over the course of his career, and he's, he could have been out of the business at Butler, and instead he gets the head job, and the rest is history. But it's just a wild business that we're a part of, Rick.
Well, you mentioned Chris Holtmann when he was named the head coach at Gardner-Webb, and he took the job at Butler as an assistant coach, and when he was there as assistant coach, after 1 year, the head coach resigned, and he just stepped into it and had a good run at Butler and took them to the Sweet 16, I think, 2 years in a row. My son Tyler had the opportunity, and he was very fortunate to play under Chris Holtmann. So I know what Chris is as a coach and as a person. And talk about someone who's detailed, who really runs one of the best practices I've ever seen. And now he's a coach at Ohio State and is regarded one of the top coaches in the entire country. You, Coach, you've been associated with so many quality coaches in your journey, and I know you've absorbed a lot along the way. So now you get the opportunity to be a head coach at Forsyth Country Day. You're bringing this wealth of opportunity and knowledge to the school. What is going to be your message to the fans and the players of what they can expect out of a Duck Esleeck team at Forsyth Country Day?
Well, we're actually going to have a team Zoom tomorrow night. It's unfortunate that that's what qualifies as team meetings these days, but it is what it is. And so, we're just going to kind of talk about some of the things that are going to be, the cornerstone of our program. And, I've talked a little bit about the skill development, but continuous improvement is going to be a big part of our focus. We want to get a little bit better every single day. We want to be tough. All of us have experienced adversity in different ways in the midst of, all of the things that have gone on here in 2020. And, everyone has a choice about how they respond when faced with adversity. You can react or you can be thoughtful and be controlled and respond. And so we want to be a tough team that's going to respond the right way, because sports puts you in tough situations all the time. You get a bad call, the shot should have gone in and it doesn't, you get injured, whatever. How are you going to respond in those situations? The best teams I've ever been a part of have been unified. And so unity will be a big thing that we're going to be about. We're going to be really together in all that we do. We're going to care about others, more than we care about ourselves. We're going to think about others first. And then the last thing, the kind of the underlying piece of it will be the character of our guys on and off the floor. I want all of the people that are associated with our program to be a great representation of Forsyth, the values that Forsyth Country Day stands for. So we want to represent that well. We want to represent our families well, and certainly our team and our teammates in a positive way in everything that we do. And underlying all of that is just going to be a culture of accountability. We're going to expect great things from each other. And when we fall short, whether that's, as a coach or a player, we're going to hold each other accountable to those high standards. And I really believe, because I've seen it done, that if you do those things over and over and over again, if you get better, if you respond to adversity the right way, if you're unified, if you have high character in everything that you do, and you can be trusted and you're held accountable to those things, that the winning will be a necessary byproduct of that. We're obviously there. We want to win. We're super competitive. But at the end of the day, we're building, future husbands and fathers, future CEOs. And so we want to build into those young men the things that we want to come out of them when they get, when they're a CEO and they're going through a quarantine and they're trying to figure out how to handle their employees' pay. Well, what lessons have we built into them, as a sixth grader, as a ninth grader, as a 12th grader, that can inform those decisions when their marriage is going through a hard patch? Like, how are they going to respond to that adversity? Because you certainly know, Rick, all of us who have lived enough years know that adversity comes for all of us. And, we wouldn't be doing our job as leaders and molders of young people if we weren't most worried about their character and the kind of men that they were going to become. And that's certainly the part of the boys basketball program that I'm going to be most worried about every single day and focused on. I have a unique opportunity as an athletic director at Forsyth to touch, 80% of the student body at Forsyth plays sports. And so I'm going to have a chance to touch 80% of those kids, which is a unique opportunity. And that's something that, those values that I just talked about, I'm hopeful and encouraged that we're going to have a chance to speak that into all of the kids that play athletics, at Forsyth.
Well, Coach, I've known you for many, many years, and I just want to say thank you for your friendship and support over the years. And I just want to say good luck to you at Forsyth Country Day. I know you're the right guy for the job, and just want to wish you the best of luck. And thank you for coming on today.
Well, Rick, thank you so much. I appreciate you more than I can tell you. There's, when you're out of a job and you're looking and you're searching and you're worried, you always remember the people who kept up with you and looked out for you and thought about you, and you were a steadfast friend in the course of, a really uncertain time in my life and in my family's life. And I will never forget that. So I appreciate you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to visit today. I hope something that got communicated today helps, one person in their coaching journey.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Rick.